a mystery. Think about the place where you first met me. Fighting it only your army. So I think that it's best if we both stay. And I wouldn't marry me either. Snakes and stones never broke my bones. So people throw rocks at things that shine. Never walk on in history. And my song is a wheeler. This is a big world. This day is ours. Still we are again. We never go out in the sun. Isn't it? You need to calm down. Look at your broken wings. I feel so peculiar. Your shoes and superstar. I remember all too well. You remember all my champagne problems. Delicate and goodbye so much harder. Dear reader, I can't find a post. My heart won't start anymore. I tell you my problem. You the truth, but never goodbye.
Okay, how's everyone doing this morning? The audio worked this time. Is Wyatt
Doing
still?
well.
Yeah.
I got
Yeah,
Abe
good.
right over my shoulder.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming this wonderful Friday evening or Friday morning. So as everyone knows, this is these tech talks are sponsored by Tori. Jason, maybe you can jump in and give a quick summary of what we are.
Cool. Now I get to do slide karaoke.
Yeah.
So this is a slide that kind of explains everything our beta product does, which is we help hotel sales teams who are understaffed to do the hours of work that it takes to bring a lead through the booking funnel as short as minutes. And we do this through a variety of automation and co-pilots that help with decision-making, that help with replying, communication, analysis, just a lot of busy work, and then also taking the friction out of actually booking a piece of business. So that's everything from contracts to payments. And we are live in beta and learning a lot in the process.
Awesome. And then as always, if anyone has internship requests or investment inquiries, let us know. We are the world's first and fastest growing AI sales platform for hotels. So just reach out to me or Jason. So
I don't see any lie in those statements. Maybe it's tautology, but yes.
I realize that this is not a picture of Wyatt, but both these individuals are very great. And Wyatt will be presenting this paper, Improving Diversity of Commonsense Generation by Large Language Models via In-Context Learning. And Wyatt is at Halluminate. Do you want to take it over, Wyatt? I can stop and let you share.
Let's do it. All right. Yeah, it's a good pick of red there.
Wyatt, remember the first day when Roz thought that my name was Wyatt? And when she was going around the circle saying everyone's names.
Yep.
This is payback for that.
It's full circle. Okay.
I saw your little Cornell Mafia off in the corner, so it seems right that we'll just create a Wyatt red hybrid.
Close enough.
Yeah.
All right, everyone can see this?
Yeah.
Sweet. So thank you for that intro, Julian. Thanks for having me at the Tori paper tech talks. Hope everyone's got, exciting plans this weekend for Memorial Day. And yeah, thanks for being here. I'm Wyatt, co-founder and CTO of Halluminate. We're an evaluation platform for generative AI applications. We can get into that later, but for now, let's talk about this paper. So I'm sure everybody read it, right? I'll put the link, or Julian, can you put the link in the chat just so people
Absolutely
have that? Thanks. Yeah, the title, kind of a mouthful, but I think we can get through it all right. I don't want to get into the details too much of the paper. I don't want to sit here and lecture. I kind of want to just present it, and then let's discuss, talk about the paper, and then just talk about kind of Gen AI, LLMs, stuff like that. So to start off, quick agenda here. Just gonna talk a couple definitions, overview of the paper and what they found, as well as what I thought of it. And then we'll get into the fun stuff and we'll all be able to share our thoughts. So to start off, I think the paper is called Improving Diversity of Common Sense Generation by Large Language Models via In-Context Learning. So we should know what those words mean. We have GCR, Generative Common Sense Reasoning. What that is the challenge of developing AI that's able to answer open-ended questions and sound like a human. So use an understanding of the world, use common sense, show some knowledge of being like a person basically, and also be grammatically correct and not just have gibberish in there. So the content that to be GCR, the content should be true and like factual, but also have a real sound to it. It's kind of like a Turing test-ish thing. Like good GCR, you don't know if it was a human or an LLM that produced it. And then in context learning, I'm sure people have heard of this, but it's a high level, it's a prompt engineering strategy. It is shown to improve LLM performance by a pretty significant margin. And like few shot, end shot, those are kind of the naive approaches. That's just putting examples in the prompt. But you can do a lot more with it. So like dynamic ICL, you can put in, context dependent information. You can generate examples like at runtime based on the user state, or if you have like their profile information, stuff like that. You can take like a caching set of questions and answers and pull from that to give the LLM more to work with essentially. So there's a lot you can do within context learning beyond just like few shot prompting. So what the paper is trying to do is make sentences that sound better, but are still correct, or like still have a high quality to them. So you can see this example here. This is one of the evaluation tasks, by the way. You have some words and you tell the LLM, generate sentences that use these words. In the red box, you have like a naive approach, pretty basic. The green box, you have the ICD approach, a little bit more complexity there. You kind of have like the dog's perspective in one of them. It's not as repetitive. So, it's just really to sound more human, more natural. Anyone have questions about this? Okay, I'm gonna take that as no.
How did they, is the bottom simply increasing randomness? Is that how you cause kind of different structures? And yet they're trying to control for grammatical correctness and factuality. Can you explain a little bit more about the difference between the two boxes?
Yeah. In terms of how they actually do it, we'll go into that. That's like, the next couple slides, but increasing randomness is part of it. But if you just get super random, then you lose the coherence. And like you could just throw random words, that'd be pretty diverse, right? But it wouldn't like incorporate the content that they're being asked to generate from. And we want it to be legible. We want it to be grammatically correct. So randomness is part of it. Within the actual model, I think everything was done with a temperature of 1. So it's not just adjusting the temperature, but yeah, like it is random, but it's constrained randomness, I guess. And yeah, you can kind of just feel the difference between these two sets, in my opinion. So here's kind of a lot of text, but this is the technique. This is ICD. Basically, the LLM generates content, self-checks it for diversity and quality. If it's good enough, it's good enough. If not, based on what it generated, it regenerates more diverse content. So it's, broken down, it's pretty simple. And it relies on a few assumptions that we can get into, but there's got to be like a diversity score that, you define as the programmer. And the way I think of it from like a human perspective, it's you write something, you look at it, you revise it to make it a little better, you read it again, you revise it to make it a little better, and then it's good enough and you send it out. So that's kind of the iterative approach here. They also have this naive, I don't know if you can like read that, but the default prompt there, and then their diversified prompt, and the actual algorithm for ICD involves taking the superset of sentences generated by those two prompts and producing like, kind of a combination. So you get the quality from the naive approach and you get the diversity from the diversified approach.
So this is essentially a chain or a sequence of, yeah.
Yep, exactly. They tested it on a few different data sets. So Commongen is the one from this slide. So it's take a few terms, generate sentences that use those terms. ComVE is given a counterfactual, so something that's not true. Explain why it's not true. I think that one's important because as we make more agentic systems, they need to be able to justify their decisions if they're acting on our behalf. So it's being able to show why an LLM made a decision. And the third is diversified GCR. So that's you have two words and you have to describe how those words connect. So like for that one, if you have the word home and the word dog, you'd want something like every dog has a home or every dog should have a home and every home should have a dog, not you can find the words home and dog in the dictionary. Like you want to connect, use the two words, but actually connect them logically. These are a couple examples from the paper. You can take a look. Everyone gets what the evaluation set is here? And yeah, just read the paper too or like reference the paper if you want more details. I don't want to go into too much of it, but that's what they're testing on. And the way that they generate that diversity score from the algorithm a few slides ago is to use a few different standardized evaluation metrics. So we have like quality scores, and then we have diversity scores for generated sentences. And their goal is to optimize the combination, which they call the harmonic mean. And that's improve diversity and quality. So if you just kind of do one or the other, like you sacrifice the other one, and the goal is to have both be maintained at a high level. Again, these are all defined in the paper, but I don't think we need to go into that too much. So what they found when they tested their strategy is that a fine-tuned model works the best. Actually, it outperforms like a human baseline, which I thought was interesting. But that comes at a cost. Like fine-tuning takes a lot of data, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of computation. And their ICD that's just prompt engineering on a base model came pretty close to the fine-tune approach, and it's much more stable. So back to that temperature idea. They did everything with a temperature of 1, and then they went back and adjusted that. And the fine-tune got a lot more chaotic and like to the point where it was incoherent. Whereas the ICD approach maintained like a pretty good balance there. You can also iterate a lot quicker with ICD because it's just prompt engineering. So it's easy to run tests and then update your prompts and see what works. They tested on GPT 3.5 Turbo and Vicuna 13B, so an open and closed source. And the results held for both. And I think the most interesting part of this for me is that the content that was generated by ICD is actually good enough to be used as training data. So they ran a follow-up test in the paper, used that data generated to train another model, and it was like performed significantly better than that base model. So I think like synthetic data generation is a huge topic, definitely something I want to talk about today, and something that this approach can be used for.
I have a question maybe from a couple of slides ago, which is, when you train, let's say a BERT model or ChatGPT version 0, and you have, a bag of words, and you have the cat in the blank, and you're trying to just autocomplete that next sentence or next word, or, fill a word in the middle. That's kind of based off of correlation between was it a co-frequency between words. So it's clearly the model's not doing common sense reasoning when it's just predicting the next word. So do you have any insights into how it goes from that to now common sense reasoning as to why dog and house are related? Or is it just now that you're combining these multiple like model, this model and sequence that's doing autocomplete each time, now it has, you know, uh, uh, more reasoning than it would have started with as just one element?
Yeah, I think it's like these models aren't actually thinking, right? Under the hood, like it's still just doing next word prediction, but it's doing it in a more interesting way. So like if you have, the cat in the blank versus you have like two words and connecting them, doing next word prediction just on the two words is a lot harder, right? Like the scope of what the possible outcomes could be is way bigger. And to get to something that's like human quality, I think is a more difficult task. So, it's not like generative common sense reasoning is like actually making these things like smart or like think, but I think it's coming closer to that, to feeling like that. And when it comes to like domain specific applications, like a customer chatbot, I think there's a lot of advantages in sounding more human, which we can talk about. The paper does have a couple limitations, so it's tested on English data sets. They only use 2 models. There's new models coming out every day. Like, I'd be interested if the new GPT-4o could, just like blow. I don't know how that would perform. So like I'm not sure what the implications are as these new models come out, but a couple of things that I found really interesting are that, yeah, the fine tuning is the best, right? But ICD comes really close and is so much cheaper and faster. So like for rapid iteration and for keeping costs down, I think that's huge. It being good enough for synthetic data generation is also massive. Like that's a really important topic right now. And if this approach can be used for that, I'm sure that would be like helpful for probably everyone on this call. They also had to show that LLMs are actually good enough at judging sentence diversity because it uses those scores in its algorithm. And so they had a bunch of like grad students judge sentence, take a group of sentences, judge that diversity, and then they had the LLMs do it. And they tracked pretty closely. So that's another interesting potential application is like, sure, these things, like you said, Julian, they're not thinking, they're just given, context doing like next token prediction, but they're able to predict something that maps pretty closely to what humans come up with. So like, definitely want to get into that a little bit more because that's kind of a possible like use case of LLMs, right? Is automating stuff that people do. So judging sentence diversity, they show LLMs can do that. And I think we were kind of getting into this, but like, why does any of this matter, right? This is a quote from the paper. So diversity is also an important factor in text generation because low diversity texts tend to be dull, repetitive, and biased. So for me, improving diversity in generation, you just have a better user experience. Like anything that needs to be chatted with, right? In my mind, like it's better if it sounds more human or more natural. It keeps the user engaged. It's also actually more accurate because you can capture nuance with like more complexity. And you're not just purely generalizing things, you can kind of catch like edge cases. So in my mind, that's huge. Like you can actually get better quality from this. And then just generally speaking, like these models, we want them to be quote unquote smart. And I think this is an approach to getting in that direction. Like you're not just repeating what it's been trained on, it's actually building on it and connecting topics. And that's kind of what we want from these things is like, yeah, you can have something that it's trained on a bunch of text, so it just repeats that text when you prompt it. But we want to be able to connect topics and like build new concepts and expand on things. And I think this gets into that, area. With that said, that's pretty much all I have. So I want to hear what you guys think.
I have a question. Can we look at the metrics a little bit more, like Common Gen and ComV and Diamond Gen? just curious, like exactly what they're ranking.
Yeah.
Like just some examples there. And then the
Yeah,
other
here.
question I had is,
Back
what
here.
does this harmonic mean? Uh, what is it? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, the definition's in the paper, but it's the combination of what is it?
It's the
Bert
square
score
root of the
and
multiplication. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so that's like their kind of top ideal metric.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are more examples in the paper as well, but these are just the three like test data sets, right? So that, you know, you have to test on something to get like reproducible results.
Mhm.
So these obviously aren't like really great real life use cases necessarily, but just trying to get a heuristic and get something that they can compare across different techniques.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to see, common gen. Because some of these, it's like, if the human score is lower on diversity, and you're basically like just prompting this LLM to say, hey, create like the most possible creative sentences, given these words, that's not really what the human was told to do, right? And does it really sound more human, or does it sound less human if, like when humans do it, the diversity is lower? Because sometimes, it may just be that humans, like if you combine a couple words, like there's only so many sentences that a human thinks about, and phrases certain ways, so like obviously you can always like have an active or passive phrasing of the sentence, and stuff like that. So it's like, do you really want your model to be doing that? Like, does that make it sound more or less human, is my question there. But then yeah, it's just like some of these scores, for like just using another LLM to score this stuff. I guess I'm sure they did some empirical research about it, but the thing that worries me is that, you know, I feel like you don't know where it's failing. You know what I mean? Because there probably is some bias in what it's, what sentences it's making that are not like making sense. And I don't know, I'm just curious to see there. And then I am also, I do want to read more into like how they actually are calculating this harmonic mean, because yeah, if they're getting to select from multiple combinations of like, two models, it's obviously going to give better performance. But yeah, I'm curious, I guess, if you had to do like an explain like I'm five, if what you would say like in a really short sentence for like what the researchers did and how they evaluated this.
Um, okay, I do want to back up real quick though. You mentioned like getting the humans to like, telling the model to just generate as like diverse or creative results as possible, and that
Yeah.
humans like aren't necessarily doing that.
Hmm.
I don't like that's not exactly accurate because if you wanted to do that, like you could just do some prompt engineering and tell the model to like, I don't know, like write a crazy poem or like, right, like the goal isn't necessarily like as diverse as possible. It's diversity within a constraint of natural sounding, human-esque. Like, so yeah, like that is true. I think also the human baseline is very subjective, right? Like that just happens to be the people that built this data set, what they put. So sure, like I'm sure some people might come up with a lot more basic examples. Other people might come up with more complicated examples. It's hard to know, like with this stuff, there's no correct answer. So it just like happens to be this data set's level of complexity that the humans generated, and that's what they're
Hmm.
comparing to.
Yeah, but
The
sorry, go ahead.
I was just say what was like the second half of your question again? Explain the
Well, because
something.
basically what it seems to me when I looked at the default versus diversified, it seems like they're just giving a different prompt, right? Like that's the main thing that's just changing between them,
Yeah.
or what. So basically it is like prompting, like if the humans were prompted to create the most diverse possible sentences, like how would they actually do, versus like you said, it's kind of hard to know with the baseline, and how are they incentivized?
Yeah, that's your point. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what the prompt to the humans was. I'm not sure.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's like It's to me, it's honestly just so hard to interpret these results because like what am I gonna do? Dig into these common sense, like dig into all of these like examples and see what exactly is in there and what exact like I guess I feel like I just have to trust these metrics and it's kind of hard, you know. I don't know. It's like um yeah, I guess it's interesting, but to me it just seems like they're doing just some they're just saying, hey, if we prompt the model with different prompts, then we get different answers kind of thing. To really like really oversimplify it and boil it down.
Yeah, what other people think?
I mean, I feel like Wyatt spends, 1,000 hours a week thinking about metrics for models. So do you have any insights into how you can find some stable metrics that don't that aren't super subjective, or do you have any just general thoughts around that?
Sure. I think the nature of this is that you're never hitting objectivity for the most part, right? Everything is going to be subjective. Like, I'm not taking these results as like proving one thing or another thing. And it is just prompt engineering, right? You're just asking the model do different stuff and it does different stuff. But
Well, I'm not
to
asking
me,
about
what
a
this
specific paper necessarily, but just broadly across, the entire field of using LLMs. Do you have any thoughts about finding stable evaluation criteria? Or do you always just kind of need a lot of human input at some point?
you're always going to need human
It's like
input.
TPO or also Jason Nichols, I think you just messaged me and not the whole group.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I can't see like can I see the chat? Okay, I can't see the chat. So if you want to throw anything in the chat, go for it. Yeah, just like as far as metrics go, I think you can't rely on any one metric, and you're never going to be able to remove people entirely, at least with the models we have now. I think what's important and what this paper does a good job of is connecting different objective metrics to kind of guide the direction that you want to go, right? So like they're not able.
Did we just lose Wyatt?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Let's give him a moment to jump back in. Red, do you see what Jason posted?
Maybe the Wi-Fi dropped in the
Yeah,
Antler
that's what I'm
office.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question. While we're waiting, does the does the algorithm or the machine, is it able to be taught different readability indexes, like the ones you find in media or like academia that allow it to be compared against like certain readability? Because I'm wondering, like, in terms of, I would call it like the holy grail, like the mecca of where I see good writing or good communication to be had is where it can be relatable to people, a la diversity as well as quality, and something that a person has not gone through education themselves, they can be taught how to speak it in a very plain, common sense, without fluffs or any kind of frills. Is that part of the meaning of this is to try to humanize the writing and in so doing, is it being compared against other readability indexes that we have found from other institutions?
That's a fantastic question. Let's give Wyatt another moment to get back on the call. And I'll ask you to repeat that actually, please.
Here's your back line, I think.
Hey guys, thanks for being patient.
The conversation actually continued in person, so
It's not fair to the rest of
which
the
is
audience here.
nice, but we can summarize some of the topics. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, let me make sure. Jonathan, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks for the floor. I
Yeah.
just have a quick question. Perhaps you guys had discussed this offline, respect that. When the algo or this tool test is you employs the harmonic mean for diversity and quality, does it use some kind of readability index that is like similarly used in media and academia to make it more relatable to audiences? Because before the advent of AI, from my other educators, they have really tried to stress the students to, write in common plain English, make it readable, make it engaging. And I'm wondering, does the readability index employ the things that we learn as best practices for good writing, or is there something else going on that makes the magic happen? Thank you.
that I can, I guess, speak a little bit to that. I'm not totally sure what, again, like what the goal of the people were. So maybe, you know, that's something I should look into more within like the, like how they built those data sets. But I don't think they really do any readability index for the evaluation criteria. If you have the paper, you can check out page 4, has like the actual definitions of all their metrics, but it's mostly n-gram overlap and, you know, entropy scores. So it's not, yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure how they're judging or like scoring readability specifically.
I appreciate the work that's being done in this space. This is really good stuff.
What was your conversation offline?
So I
Um,
think what's really
You
interesting.
go for
Oh,
it.
Red, you take it. You
No,
take
no,
it.
no,
I talk
please,
too much.
no, no. I would like you to go, and then I'll butt in if I disagree with whatever you're saying or anything.
Okay, well then, allow me to take a stab at it. I thought what was most interesting to me is that as the foundation models improve so quickly, you know, this is published in, or either as a preprint in April, you know, late April at that. And, you know, 4.0 is just amazing when you work with it. When the foundation models improve so quickly, these tools that we are, and these algorithms that we're using to change the performance of kind of the historical or earlier models may become most useful when you're trying to get a foundation model to do something that it wouldn't otherwise do. And I think that's really interesting to me, where we're trying to make an LLM sound like a specific role or make specific decisions that when we look at what was successful at training up older models, maybe similar tools or similar algorithms that are relevant to what we're trying to do when we're bending the will of even a later model to how we want to use it. I don't know. Is that the right way to be thinking about it? And I'll let Red kind of qualify my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I do think, yeah, that the fact that the models are progressing so quickly does make this research kind of like not necessarily obsolete, because they're more talking about techniques than like, my main gripe with all this is that the results are so hard to interpret. And so like, I guess the complaint that I was having in our conversation is that, you know, like, should something like this really actually be like a full paper, or could this be something like slightly less formal and something where there's like maybe some example or some chatbot that I can play around with to actually see what this looks like? Because like, to me, that kind of evaluation would make much more sense than, you know, what the metrics I'm reading on this paper just don't mean anything to me. And the size of these like things is so big that I just am not even going to try to start looking into it. It's just not like, I'm sorry, maybe some of you are, but it's, you know, there's a reason why they're using LLMs to evaluate this stuff, and it's because it's just too much text for like a human to read. But then at that point, to me, it's like we're just like, I don't want to say like fighting fire with fire, but you know, it's basically like double the whatever, you know, could have been going wrong with LLMs in the first place and what they're generating. You're just doubling the amount of problems because you're also using an LLM to evaluate it. So like, it all boils down to how much do you trust these things in the first place to like, you know, and I don't know. So I think that those were some of my complaints. And like, what I was talking about was just, yeah, the rigor of some of these papers. It seems like there's just so much, so many people want to publish in this space that, you know, people are kind of, you know, jumping to publish something. And is it really worth like like several, you know, people with PhDs taking months to review every single thing in this paper to figure out if whether this is contributing new knowledge in like an academic sense? And I think from that perspective, I would say like it's not amazing, but that's like my personal bias, right? I'm like looking at this from someone who just is used to reading like papers and has, you know, been reading these papers since before really like LLMs were even like in the machine learning type sphere of like what people were publishing, right? So it's I don't know, it's just been interesting to see the journey from that perspective.
Yeah, I agree. This is not like the most robust scientific paper. Yeah, I don't think it, it hits on, it's not like gonna be a seismic shift in the world of generative AI. But what I do think is interesting is what Jason, you were saying, which is that if you have some foundation model that can get you 99% of the way there, and that's what's doing the heavy lifting, now you can throw this technique on top of any foundation model. Like this is a framework that can be applied and can be tweaked. And I think the important part that the paper focuses on is that because it's just prompt and you're not actually changing the model, you can iterate really fast and you can specify this to like the exact use case you need. So for applications like, you want your hotel agent to sound a certain way, like this technique I think is really applicable. But totally agree, Red. Like in terms of, 10 years from now, like no one's going to be talking about this paper. I don't think it's just, it could be probably like an article on Medium that some guy in his basement like came up with. But I do think it's interesting, and I think it actually applies like for a lot of the stuff we're doing. So that's kind of why I liked it.
Jason, do you want to comment on your comment about this other paper, The Curse of Recursion? I assume that's about the problem of training LLMs on LLM generated data.
Yeah, that was just really, that was the interesting fact of this paper was the suggestion that they could reuse this as the synthetic data as training data, when it's been pretty well documented in the past that doing that leads to model collapse. So I was curious, just, I mean, I don't have the means, the time, or the interest to validate their claim. Just to be clear, I'm not necessarily calling it into question. I just said that it's an interesting result that it's separate from what has been previously accepted.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? So I'll give the calendar schedule that's coming up. Next week, Peter Turlicki, Senior Data Science Manager at QVC, is presenting Tree of Thoughts, Deliberate Problem Solving with Large Language Models. And then the week after, we have a member of our team presenting a paper. He'll be choosing that. We have Alex, CTO of Spun, presenting. Then we have Jason Nichols, who you guys all just heard from, the spiritual godfather of these talks. He'll be presenting after that. Cool. I also want to give space if anyone wants to make any asks, like they're hiring or anything.
Yeah, we actually are looking for potentially a few interns. So if anyone knows, people that are looking for a job right now, send them our way. Hopefully they know how to code. That'd be ideal.
Wyatt, Antler gives us access to Folio, which I think subsidizes those interns for you. So
Yeah,
might be able to
somebody
get
sent me
a
that
few
and I'm
free
gonna check that out
interns.
today. So thanks,
Yeah.
Alex.
Definitely look into that. Yeah.
Also, if anyone else wants to get on the calendar, definitely message me. And Jonathan Wu is asking for an opportunity as well if anyone's hiring. So do you want to give a quick summary of Halluminate before we jump off?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So I don't know if I think Jerry was on this call before we got cut off, but Jerry and I started Halluminate to solve the problem of how to evaluate these generative AI, applications, because it's not as easy, kind of to Red's point, as just something like an objective, it's right or it's wrong. So we're building a platform to do that, and focusing on financial institutions right now, mostly like chatbots and customer facing products. So anybody who's working in that space would love to talk to you and kind of, see where we can overlap. But thanks again, Julian. I think these sessions are great. I was saying this actually the first session, but it really brings me back to like a class in college and like debating like a paper, in like an academic setting. And and I don't get that as much anymore. So thanks for
Yeah,
setting this up.
but Wyatt, next time you post about it on LinkedIn, you better tag us.
I'll do it today, Jason.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say thanks for hosting these guys. It's these are great fun, and I know I like to play devil's advocate during these, so no hard feelings like to anyone who's ever presenting. I just I feel like it does spice up the conversation a little, so
Yeah, positive.
hopefully everyone agrees.
Yeah, Red,
and
I'm never gonna talk to you again.
it's good that we're towards the end of your antler then, Wyatt. But yeah, no, thank you so much. It like these have been really great.
Also, shout out to Jisong. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick? He works on AI at Pinterest.
Yeah, so thanks for being invited to this event. I would say it's great organized and it's great like academic setup to read some papers. And my background, I'm right now work at Pinterest and work on their machine learning infrastructures. And in the past, we do also launch a few internal projects related to the large language model domain things. And before that, I spent 2 years at Google. And before that, I graduated from Columbia, major in computer science.
Excellent.
Go
Nice to meet you.
Lions.
Okay. Have an amazing week, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys.